Well, folks, welcome to one more episode of DojoLIVE, connecting experts like you, brought to you by Nearsoft. And we're getting ready for another great interview. And well, today, in this occasion, it's about travel and travel tech. And well, before we get into that, I'd like to welcome again and thank my fellow teammate, Nearsoftian, Tulio Siragusa, who's in LA. Hi, Tulio.
Hey, Carlos. Good to be here. Very excited for our episode today.
Same here, Tulio. And of course, we have our guest of honor today is Gilad Berenstein. He is the CEO of UTrip, and he's going to be telling us all about his company, what he does, and where he comes from, and pretty much anything that's related to his business. Hi, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you here, Gilad. Welcome to today's show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Likewise here. Okay. Well, Gilad, two things, if I may. I'd like to ask you, well, first of all, just a couple of questions, and then we can move on to today's chosen topic. Tell us about, can you tell us a little bit about you and then about UTrip and what you're putting out there for the world to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Gilad, and as the name probably tells you already, I grew up in Israel. And my dad is an artificial intelligence architect. So everything I have to say comes with the perspective of a little kid who became super fascinated by artificial intelligence and all the possibilities it might have in the future. And then my moved to the States as a teenager when my dad joined a startup, and I got to watch him do the startup thing for real when I was a teenager. And I graduated from the University of Washington here in Seattle. And after finishing school, I took a trip to Europe, like millions of other people do. And I planned on using books and websites and pen and paper, just like everyone else. But I ran into the same little hurdles and obstacles that travelers face every day. Misinformation, holes in my itinerary, things being closed or the wrong location. And worst of all, of course, was lack of personalization. I went like everyone else and I downloaded the top 10 list from TripAdvisor and got a trip guidebook. But those experiences felt impersonal and not unique. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And that was the genesis of UTrip. So at a high level, UTrip is an artificial intelligence recommendation engine where we combine data from experts on the ground, like chefs, artists, historians, etc., with the data of our millions of travelers from around the world in order to make trip planning easy, enjoyable, and personal.
Cool. And talk about, well, speaking about AI, we have recently had a number of guests precisely around that topic, but we're not going to delve into that. I just wanted to mention that AI has been present in DojoLIVE for a long while now in terms of topics. So thank you, Gilad. And Gilad, one more thing before I pass on the mic to Tulio. You chose as a topic why personalization matters in travel or travel tech. Now, you say that using personalization, travel brands can go past the transaction, right, to focus on what really matters to the traveler. Can you tell us why you chose this particular topic today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am totally passionate about personalization. And I think personalization matters in every single industry, but I think travel is one of the most important. If we think about the way that most of us spend our vacation time, we spend all year saving up days, saving up money to be able to take that trip that we've dreamt about all year, or sometimes an entire lifetime. And what a waste it is when you go on this trip and it's not unique, it's not special, and most of all, it's not personally built around your preferences, your desires, and your dreams. So I think that travel from a consumer perspective is an incredibly important industry to offer personalization in. And on the other side, I also believe, and we have shown, that when brands offer personalization, they're able to engage their customers more deeply, they're able to increase the conversion rate on their inventory, and they're able to grow their share of wallets by introducing new inventory to the same customers. So personalization creates a win-win-win relationship within our industry.
Cool. Thank you so much, Gilad. So, Tulio, I understand you have a series of great questions to ask. So why don't you go ahead and take the mic?
Yes, first of all, we have to activate our AI chat, Carlos, so that our audience knows how to submit questions for Gilad. You ready?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, hang on.
Hold on one second. Let me configure my hardware. Yes. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to press the button.
There you go.
Ooh.
That's totally integrated with Twitter, so submit your questions right on there.
It's right here, you guys. If you have any questions for Gilad, just go here. You go to Twitter. You know how to use Twitter, and our chatbot is fully integrated with it. So this is where you need to go to ask questions. So, guys, question away, ask away. Tulio, back to you.
Gilad, great to have you. This is obviously a very big topic today. Personalization has become more and more important in pretty much everyday life. It's kind of like if you don't offer it, you're way behind the curve in serving customers. But I'm curious to find out what's unique about your value proposition, and how do you feel it's defensible against other offerings? How did you get here? How did you create personalization for what you're offering? Can you give us a little history?
Absolutely. So ultimately, the travel industry is an incredibly ripe vertical or industry for personalization because of the incredible amount of data and the fact that most of that data is unstructured. It's reviews we leave on TripAdvisor, it's ratings we leave around the web, all sorts of things like that. So naturally, I've always thought that the travel industry is a place that there's a lot of opportunity for personalization, a lot of opportunity for artificial intelligence. When I started UTrip, we started as a B2C company with the goal of essentially becoming TripAdvisor 2.0 to create an experience that was much better. And we learned quickly that it was very difficult to become the market leader, especially in an industry where advertising is considered to be one of the most expensive digital advertising units on the web. And what we realized is that we had brands coming to us who want to use our technology, who want to use our AI within their own ecosystems. And we learned that these brands were beginning to figure out what we had believed from the very beginning, which is that if you provide customers with an experience that is all about what they want to do on their vacation, on their trip on the ground, they would engage with you more deeply. And if they engage with you more deeply, they would consider inventory more seriously. And by doing that, they would increase conversion rates. And then we realized that if you were able to convert a customer into your inventory, a hotel room if you're a hotel chain, a flight if you're an airline, you would then also have the opportunity to sell them downstream inventory that would increase your share of wallet while providing a better experience for your customer. And that's the win-win relationship I spoke about before. So we took this B2C product, and what we learned is that people wanted to engage and wanted really unique experiences. We took this interest from B participants in the market to offer personalization, wanted to engage their customers further. And by combining those two, we're able to take our solution, our recommendation engine further. The last thing I say is you asked about defensibility of the technology. And like any good artificial intelligence, it's all about data. So when we started UTrip, we worked with about 20 different companies in different parts of the travel space, air, cruise, hotel, destination services, etc., in order to collect data about different types of customers. And at this point, UTrip has hundreds of millions of data points about preferences of travelers all over the world, which makes sure our recommendations, our algorithms are the best in the world.
Great. So you're way past the hypothesis. Obviously, you have clients. But before we go there, I wanted to find out, how did you develop the technology? What was sort of the research you did behind the scenes that gave you basically the ability to say, this is what we're going to do and here's why? I know you had done some research and stuff. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we started with was about 6 months of psychology research with professors at the University of Washington here in Seattle. And we asked two very simple questions. One is, what makes a good trip and what makes a bad trip? And the second question is, what is the process a person goes through in their mind, both consciously and subconsciously, to plan a trip? And the answers were actually very straightforward. To that first question, what leads to the best travel experiences, especially when we ask people to describe the best trip of their life, the thing that they always had in common was authenticity. If you go to Paris, you probably go to the Louvre, and you probably have a great experience at the Louvre because it's absolutely beautiful. But you're very unlikely to tell me about the Louvre if I asked about your perfect trip, because you know that I've probably been there, and everyone else I know who's been to Paris has also probably been to the Louvre. You're going to tell me about the concert you went to, that person you met, the picnic you had, that restaurant in the back of an alley that you went to and you're the only tourist there. Those are the things that would really stick in our mind, so authenticity. When you flip that question and ask what leads to the worst travel experiences, the leading response was a feeling of a wasted experience, which combines wasted time and wasted money. We've all probably wasted money on something. We've all probably wasted time on something. And that feeling really sucks. But when you compound that onto a trip that you spent all year dreaming about and planning for, that feeling is much, much worse and it sticks with you. The second question was, how do people plan trips? And ultimately what we saw is there were three major steps in the decision-making process that people went to. First are parameters. And these parameters are really big picture. They're things like, who am I traveling with? Meaning if I'm traveling with little kids, I have to go on a different trip than I'm traveling with just adults or just friends. So what are the parameters? So what is there a purpose? Is this for a wedding? Is this for a trip? Is this exploration? Is this relaxation? Who is going with me? Second are meta attributes. These are things like, how spontaneous do I want to be on this trip? What kind of pace am I looking for? Do I want to wake up early and do stuff all day long and run all over Rome? Or do I want to sit by the beach and relax most of the time? So it's about pace, it's about budget, it's about spontaneity, it's about these meta level factors that augment the things you do. And then finally, it's all about preferences. And this is where we get into things that we all think about consciously every day. Things like, are we into art or history? Do we want to go shopping? Are we foodies? All these things that we know about ourselves and about the trips we want to go on. And the thing I'll add is what's really interesting is those first two phases I mentioned were largely done subconsciously, meaning that you don't consciously stop and say, on my next vacation, do I want to relax or do I want to explore? You already have that pre-computed in your brain, what you're looking to do. And obviously that could change based on who you travel with. But the whole point here is decisions are both conscious and subconscious. And ultimately what we did is we took this research, we took these findings we had from the psychologists, and we then built an input system, an onboarding system for our users that took them down that natural decision-making path on their own, making the process easier because we're not asking them to make decisions out of sequence, out of order. And because it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, making it more engaging, and that's how we see those awesome engagement numbers that we see. So that's really where we began working on UTrip.
Well, that's cool. Before I ask you the next question, I just want to get some clarity. Who are your customers now? Are you going direct to consumer, or are you more of a platform for the OTAs and such?
Yeah, so UTrip is a B2B company. So our clients are hotels and airlines and cruise lines and OTAs and others. But we're a B2C product. So right, every single one of my partners, my B2B partners who uses UTrip, gets it in order to provide their customers with more personalization, better trip planning experiences, better recommendations, etc. So we're a B2B business with a B2C product.
Great. So I'm curious to find out, there's massive amounts of data and all those sort of touch points you talked about. They can create thousands of different permutations of possibilities. What kind of tech stack did you invest in, or algorithm? Is there a particular model you've used? Is this proprietary? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Totally. So we've built three core pieces of technology that make everything we do possible. The first is a system called Snow Globe, which is a machine learning ecosystem we've built that's all about curating destinations and understanding inventory. And the whole idea here is we combine a whole bunch of data on the web. This is data coming from our partners about their hotels or flights or tours. This is data coming from TripAdvisor, or Yelp, or Zagat, or the New York Times, and. So the first thing is all about collecting data so we have breadth and coverage of information and varying perspectives on an experience. Meaning, why one might like it and we might dislike this restaurant. Second, we built a travel graph, which is a database. But ultimately, inside this database, we have a machine learning analysis, cohort analysis that's built into there that's doing real-time cohort building. And one of the coolest aspects of UTrip is, unlike most systems out there, our cohorts are not finite, they're infinite. Meaning that every single day, our system is creating new cohorts based on new user behavior and new data we have coming in, and potentially retiring old cohorts if people no longer belong in that cohort. And the other thing I'll add that's really cool is a user can belong in multiple cohorts. So on certain trips, I'm the millennial romance seeker when I travel with my wife. And on other trips, I am the foodie millennial traveling with my buddies, or the adventure seeker traveling with my brothers, or the business traveler when I go for work. And through that, the system is able to better understand our various needs in various situations. And the third thing we've built is UTripia. UTripia is a genetic algorithm. So for those of you who are in the algorithm world, you'll know what that means. Basically, all that means is we introduce some levels of randomization within the generation creation process in order to make sure that we haven't overlooked something that might be a better fit for this specific customer. And our algorithms creates roughly 10,000 itineraries in 1/3 of a second. It begins by looking at your interest and your budget, and then adds in factors like hours of operation, seasonality, geography, and diversity as it makes those recommendations. So it's not just looking at what you're interested in, but it's also looking at the reality on the ground to make sure this trip is enjoyable and realistic and all those things we want it to be.
As a company that licenses your platform, do I need to have a certain number of consumers? Does it work better with a higher volume of transactions and data, or is it flexible enough to be, in other words, who's your typical customer?
Yeah, 100%.
They have to have.
Yeah, so we've got two types of customers. One of them are smaller businesses in the travel space. So these are going to be smaller hotel chains with as few as one property, or maybe up to 10 or 15. These are going to be, cities and states like San Francisco or Dallas or New York City or Seattle that license the technology for their tourism operations, or all sorts of other smaller partners we work with. And for them, they really don't need to have any technical sophistication or a minimum number of users or data to work. The system comes in with hundreds of millions of data points already preloaded, so the recommendation engine can work even if you've got a relatively small client base. So on that front, we want to work with all these small players, and ultimately for them, creating technology is very difficult, right? If you operate a hotel or a small cruise line, it is very difficult for you to create your own technology. So partnering with a company like UTrip makes perfect sense. The other group of customers are very large customers like JetBlue or TUI or Holland America Cruise Line. And these customers are really coming to us because they need big data support. They typically already have data about their customers' preferences and transactions and reviews, but it's difficult for them to make use of them in a really personalized fashion that's directly available to their consumers. So when they come to us, again, there's no minimum or maximum number, but they typically come with a lot of data already pre-existing about their customers and about their inventory, and they want the UTrip engine to enrich it and to make sense of it. So those are the types of customers we work with.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because at least from what I've seen, most of the machine learning platforms require massive amounts of consumers. It works on volume, so it's great to hear that you made it accessible for the little guys, basically.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think this is a really exciting area, not just in travel, but in tech in general. And the ability for startups like UTrip to democratize access to machine learning capabilities, to artificial intelligence, for companies that are never going to be able to afford to build the staffs and engineering teams necessary to create that. And I think that's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs and for investors, like I said, in travel and beyond.
Yeah, speaking of which, how does this change the landscape of the industry? In other words, if I have access to this, now I always equate to the idea of Walmart's made so many investments internally in their technology. They were one of the leaders in data and big data and analytics. And it was always like, if you could build that kind of power for a small business, you can make that small business leapfrog its competition. If I'm a smaller player in this space, do I get an advantage of using this platform? What benefit do I get in terms of being able to compete with the big players?
That's exactly right. So there's a few things that come into there. So one, of course, what I already mentioned about data. Right? If you're a small player, you are never going to have hundreds of millions of data points because you just don't have enough customers coming through like that. So one of the big benefits is by coming to a platform like UTrip, you get to benefit from the learnings that we've had across all of our partners. And through that, you get to benefit from the scale of data that you're probably never going to be able to generate yourself. The second is quality of experience. No matter what hotel you stay at, a small boutique or a brand like Hilton or Marriott, a global brand, you're going to want the same thing. You want a nice place to stay, you want a great place to eat, you want some interesting things to do along the way. If I'm Hilton or any other large brand, I have a massive team that I can dedicate to providing you recommendations and content and experiences that are really tailored for you. And our big partners like Hilton and SPG do a beautiful job of offering this to their customers. But on the other hand, if you're a small property, you're just really busy keeping the doors, the all things that operate. We can provide you with digital experiences that you're probably not going to be able to offer yourself. And that experiential offering is really going to allow you to compete with your customers in a more meaningful way. And the other thing I'll add is Airbnb. Every single person in my industry is thinking about Airbnb, even the people who are not traditional hotel players and are competing, just one-on-one in terms of a hotel. They're all thinking about it. And that's because Airbnb's genius, I think, is coined in their slogan, travel like a local, even if only for tonight. I think that slogan captures the mood of the traveling public in a way that's really powerful. And Airbnb has built an entire business around that brand, around that experience. And if you're an existing company, it's very hard for you to rebrand your experience all around what you do on the ground, the experiential travel. And by having an offering like UTrip, you begin to take small steps in their direction to be able to compete.
So how do you go about validating new features and functionality in the marketplace?
Yeah. So UTrip.com, and I invite all of our listeners today to go to UTrip.com and plan a trip, is our test ground. So every time you go to UTrip.com, it's going to probably look a little bit different. But that's a place where we roll out all sorts of A/B tests on a weekly basis to try to better understand how do we provide better recommendations, better experiences, better service. And then those experiences that work out, we then roll out into our partnerships so they can offer that to a much, much larger group of customers. Also, we have some partners who are very innovative and are really into testing and learning to improve the customer experience. So we also get to run some tests on our client sites that obviously get dramatically large amounts of traffic. And through that, we get to learn a lot very quickly about the way that people want to engage.
Speaking of partners, what kind of partnership would you consider very strategic to your growth and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So other than the verticals that we're most focused on, which is air, hotel, and cruise, right now we're really thinking about tour operators, companies like TUI, as well as OTAs, companies like Expedia or Priceline or Booking.com. The thing that's interesting about these tour operators is they're a horizontal provider versus a vertical provider. Right? Hilton owns 11 brands of hotels, meaning no matter what type of hotel you want to stay in, they're probably going to have something to fit your needs. But ultimately, they still really only exist in one small fraction of the needs you have as a customer when it comes to planning a trip. Expedia and TUI and others are trying to offer that experience horizontally across all of your needs. That problem set is both more challenging to solve, but also really exciting because that's the holy grail consumers are looking for. Because when we plan a trip, we don't think about 27 different providers. We think about one experience that we're really excited about going on. So we're really looking to work with more OTAs, with more tour operators, and other players in this space who are really trying to own that experience horizontally and to support their customers across all of their needs when it comes to travel.
Tulio, I have a question for Gilad, and which I'd like to ask because we're approaching the wrap-up time. Well, we're talking about personalization, and when I hear personalization, I think about me or the individual as a traveler and as a customer, and I think that travel experiences are unique for each human being. So in that sense, for example, what's fun or enjoyable to me might not be for somebody else. In that context, Gilad, I'd like to ask you, how would you say that how does the subjectiveness of the travel experience influences travel technology and the shapes it's taking nowadays?
Yeah, that's an important question. So I'll say even one more thing on top of what you said, which is not only that each person an individual, when you go on a trip with different people, your needs change even though you're the same person. And I mentioned that example before. If I travel with my wife versus a friend versus a business colleague, my needs on that trip are different, my wants on that trip are different. So ultimately, we have believed in the philosophy of the art and science from the very beginning. The fact that 90 or 95% of the decisions you make in travel are science. Am I going with kids? And if so, is a bar an appropriate place to be recommended? If I'm going to romance, and if that's a hostel or a shared bedroom is a place to be recommended. Some of those things are the science, right? Or if I'm on a low budget, I'm being recommended to go to 11 Madison Park in New York City. All those are examples of getting the science wrong. And the science is where artificial intelligence is perfect. Narrowing down the possibility of options, making sure you don't zigzag the city, etc. The last 5% is the art. And the art is exactly what you said. It's completely subjective, and there's absolutely no right or wrong answer because each of us is an individual's own desire and identity. So the example was here in Seattle. For any of our listeners who've been here to Seattle, there's a beautiful lookout point called Cary Park. And I always ask the question, is Cary Park most beautiful at sunrise or sunset? That is exactly a perfect example of the art. Each of us come up with our own answer. So the goal here is to have artificial intelligence take you 90–95% of the way, and to give you a really great tools and experiences that take yourself the last 5 or 10%.
I've been to that point. It's a matter of whether you're having a cup of coffee or a drink.
That's exactly right.
So, curious to find out, it's obvious you went through at least one pivot, right? You were going down this path of being a B2C and now you're B2B. How did you manage through that, and how do you tackle things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Pivots are hard. I'll say maybe it's a self-serving. I always respect entrepreneurs who can pivot because it means that you can see your baby and there might be a prettier baby down the road and you have to take a turn to get there. I think it's very difficult. What made our pivot actually a little bit easier than average is that the core philosophy of what we were doing and why we were doing it didn't change. What changed for us was the business model and the delivery mechanism. The same core product you see today is the same core product we worked on before the pivot. But instead of saying UTrip.com will become a destination site and the end-all be-all to your needs, I think we took an approach that is probably more likely to succeed, where we partner with folks who've already proven themselves and have already built trust with the consumers, with the public, and provided those same experiences since then. So, I started this company when I was 23, and I think like all other 23-year-old founders, I started with a dream, with a vision that the travel could be personalized, that it could be easier to plan a trip than it currently is. And we are still able to deliver and to build on that dream, even though we're delivering this technology through different mechanisms. So the pivot was hard, but I think because we were true to who we are and to our core philosophy, it made that whole process a lot easier for us.
I have 2 more questions before I hand it back to Carlos, because we're coming up on time. If you were an advisor to your company, looking from the outside, what kind of advice would you give to the leadership team?
Yeah.
Just
focus.
Emotionally unattached, just looking from the outside.
Yeah, it's focus, and it's true for UTrip, and it's true for almost any other startup I've ever been involved with in any fashion. It's really easy in any startup to lose focus. And I think in travel, it's easier than most because we have so many needs during our travel life cycle. The average American begins to plan a leisure trip 4 months before they go on that trip. There are a lot of needs we have in the 4 months before, in the few days of our trips, and the weeks afterwards. And because, like I said, I started with a vision of we want to bring personalization across the experience, we probably bit off more than we could chew at first. So my advice to myself would be focus, would be really make sure that you are the best in the world at a couple things. And in our case, we believe it's inventory enrichment and recommendations of proper inventory to the right users. And let all those other things come and be built with time in their natural course, but really focus on 1 or 2 things that differentiate the marketplace and that provide the greatest value to your customers.
Great. My last question is, you're a growing company. You reach, I think you said, about 10 million consumers today, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your culture as a company. What are the guiding principles that you're bought into that you're going to count on in terms of growth and attracting the right people?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost in my book, it starts with hiring. And it's hiring people who are passionate about the same things you're passionate about. And there's nothing wrong if people are not passionate about those things. They might still be amazing engineers, amazing business people, but early, you can't afford to have people who are not passionate about what you're passionate about. So I consider myself to be a pretty poor interviewer. I have great people on my team who are much better interviewers than I. But the one question I ask every single applicant who's a finalist that get hired at UTrip is, tell me about yourself as a traveler. And honestly, there is no right or wrong answer. I'm not looking for any type of traveler because our users are diverse and have completely different perspectives and different interests when it comes to travel. I am just looking for passion. And I believe that if you have that passion, you're going to be a better product builder and a better salesman of that product. So that's the number one thing that I would say unites all of us here at UTrip is we're all deeply passionate about travel. The second is we're all data-driven, and we all believe in the power of data. And we all believe that decision-making is best done with data. It's not that vision is not important. Vision is critical. But vision without data is probably going to take you to a place that's unanticipated and not as great as a possible outcome. So I think those are two things that unite the folks who work with me here at UTrip, and I think have allowed us to be successful. And then the other one, the last one I'll add is trust and freedom. I think every single person wants to feel trusted, and every single person wants to feel ownership over their day and over their schedule. And we try to the best of our ability to provide a lot of that freedom, a lot of that trust, and really allow people to take ownership, which I think ultimately benefits the individual as well as the company at the same time.
Sounds like we'd be a match made in heaven.
There we go.
We've been building travel tech products for 11 years, and I'm very passionate about it. And the Airsoftings have traveled the world over, so we should talk some more. Carlos, absolutely. I'm going to hand it back to you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Gilad, and I'll pass it back to Carlos to wrap it up.
Thank you, Tulio, and thank you, Gilad. I think the only thing left for me to do is, well, I usually kind of wrap it up with, a very generic but meaningful statement or question, which is, what sort of, in your industry, and consider your product and the audience, what sort of final words of wisdom would you like to leave your audience today with?
Yeah, so I'll say from an industry perspective is ask yourself what your customer cares about. And if you are selling to a traveler, ask yourself, what do they care about? And the answer is probably not a transaction. The answer is probably an experience. And transactions, of course, facilitate those experiences. But that would be the number one thing I would implore every single person in the industry to ask, is what is your customer actually want? The way to best need. Because if you serve those needs, those customers will be loyal to you, and the profitability will follow. And in terms of travelers, I would say get off the beaten path. Do something unique. Do something different. When you take yourself out of your comfort zone, we learn, we expand, we experience. And even if it doesn't work out exactly as we planned, usually it leads to an amazing story that you're going to tell your kids and grandkids in the future. So have fun, because I think there's nothing better than travel.
Cool. Yeah, and I totally agree with you in that sense. I thought I usually try to favor more the use of travelers rather than tourists. Tourists is kind of on the
100%.
side. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I agree with that one. I always look for the local experience, always the local restaurant, the local places. I don't want to be a tourist when I'm somewhere. So
exactly.
Sounds like UTrip is the place for me to go.
Exactly right.
Cool. Exactly. So, well, Tulio, Gilad, we need to wrap up today's interview, and I'd like to send a special thank you note to someone who's in the background, and she's one of our fellow teammates. She's doing the social media part, and also Twitter. She's in charge of Twitter. Carmen, if you're I know you're watching, Carmen. So please, a big thank you goes out to you. You're doing a great job with Twitter. So thank you, Carmen, for that. And thank you, Gilad, for having been with us today. And we're going to be in touch. And as ever, thank you, Tulio, for joining me today as host here on DojoLIVE, connecting experts like you. And before we go, just one final quick announcement about next week. And as you know, DojoLIVE, we host weekly interviews. And I'd like to mention that next week, on Wednesday, same time as today, 1 p.m. Pacific, we are going to have Nina Baliga. She is the co-founder and CEO of Diversity. And she believes that problems can be solved, people of all backgrounds and walks of life, especially in the workplace. And so she has a lot to say about this topic. So stay tuned, folks, for Nina Baliga tomorrow, next Wednesday from Diversity. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much again. And stay tuned for more upcoming episodes of DojoLIVE, connecting experts like you. Have a great day, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.